Thank you so much for joining us for session 3. I hope you've been here for the first 2 sessions, but even if you haven't, you won't be I don't think you're going to feel like you're missing out or there are things that you're not understanding. If this is the first session in this executive function series that you have joined us for, and you wouldn't mind, throw something in the chat just so that we know. Might go through things a little slower here in the beginning, just so that I know that everyone kind of has the same background information as we go into looking at working memory. So here's just the little blurb about our center that we talk about every time. We are here to help you guys. We want to do all that we can to increase your knowledge and skill base to help our students who we're seeing every single day in the classroom. Bill missed the second session, firing squad at dawn. That first one was on inhibition, and we will talk very briefly about it today. So today we're going to define working memory. We are going to take a look at how working memory affects our students in the classroom. And then we're going to look at strategies and interventions to kind of help bridge some of those gaps and teach students some of these working memory skills. Because remember, we're not born with executive function skills, we're only born with the potential to develop them. So here's the Padlet. Alana threw it in the chat already, so if you wanted to open that, you are more than welcome to. All right, so just to get started, just want to recap us because I know it has been a couple of weeks, but I just want to remind us that these are the 3 basic components of executive function that we're discussing in this training series. So inhibition, working memory, and cognitive flexibility. These are the 3 hallmarks of executive function. So these are kind of like the baseline skills that we need to have in order to get those higher order skills like goal setting and follow through execution and those sorts of things. We have to have inhibition develop first because that's the ability to, kind of ward off those distractions that we have in everyday life. And sometimes those distractions are environmental distractions. So the piece of things that's going on around us, sometimes it's more internal. It's more of the attentional piece that our brain is constantly going or thinking or prohibiting us from focusing on just one task. We have to have the ability to tune out that irrelevant stimuli so that we can access our working memory. And that's what we're really going to talk about today. So anyone have a guess why you think you have to be able to have inhibition before you can really start working with that working memory? Just curious if there are any thoughts out there as to why that might be. And I know that might be an unfair question because I haven't exactly told you what working memory is yet. So I don't mean for it to be a trick at all. So let's try something. So if you are in a place where you can access an internet browser, then you can do this activity with us. And I am going to throw this website in the chat. So this is a fun little activity. I say fun, you might find it frustrating, depending on what you're trying to inhibit right now. But this is a little activity designed to kind of test in some ways our memory. So we're going to take a look at this 2 different ways. So this first way is looking at some auditory digit span responses. So if I do this correctly, it's a big if. I start a second share and you see a web page that says cognitive fun at the top left? Yes, no, oh yes, okay, good. So this whole website is really kind of fun and interesting. This is the same website that I tried to do an inhibition game with on the last presentation, and for whatever reason, the website wasn't working. So I'm actually curious now. I think I can. So yes, so this is the go, no go. We talked about in the last session about different games that you could play to increase our ability to tune out stimuli. And so anything that is a go, no go game where you like have to stop doing something instantly is a really good practice for inhibition. So for young kids, games like red light, green light, any sort of like freeze tag, freeze dance. Simon Says those are all really great games. This is another great thing. You could even do this with your students as long as the, you don't have like a block or something on this. So this is this game, I kind of set it into motion, but you're just supposed to click on the green dot and ignore the patterns. So it's going to, oh, it tells me to be patient. It does not know that that is not an area where I excel. It's kind of waiting to start. But you can go in, there are like 3 different go, no-go games that you can do. And so you're only going to click that green circle that it keeps showing if it's a solid green. If it's not a solid green, then you don't click it. It gives you a score and it gives you like a time. So you'll notice every time that you click it, that it's right, it's going to tell you how long it took you to react to that. So works on reaction time and things like that. Just kind of a fun little activity if you ever had downtime with your kids and you wanted to work on some stuff. So we're going to look at the memory, and we are doing let me just put I don't see that test on here, or I wouldn't call it a test. You can change the length of digits that we're going to look at. It only goes to 3 or 4, so it's not a huge number that you're going to have to worry about. But on this, we have 6 trials for this session. So if you're doing it on your own, then you're going to get your own like information. So this is an auditory. So the computer is going to play a series of numbers or say a series of numbers, and then you enter them in to the bar.
1, 3, 2.
So I was talking, I think that first number was an 8. So we click it and then play again.
7, 6, 7.
So far pretty easy. Bill, are you able to do this? You're the only face I can see. Oh, he's doing it. Awesome. Okay.
3, 2, 6, 5.
Oh, yep. I hit the wrong button. I know she said 3.
2, 5, 5, 6, 6, 8, 6, 8, 9, 5, 4, 6.
All right, so now once I get the 6 done that it tells me I need to do, I can hit end, and it says send results, but it should show you what the results are. So you can keep practicing this, and you can have your students continue practicing, and they will get to see what their stats are and see if they increase. So you do not have to create an account. You do not have to log in, but you can see kind of where other people are. So how difficult on a scale of 0 to 10, how difficult was that? Sarah said a 4, a 2. So this one hopefully was not too difficult, not too taxing. So even if you had something going on, you would probably still be doing okay on this particular task that I asked you to do. Yes, Alana, you bring up a good point. It takes a second to go from the audible version to the written, and it takes a split second almost before you can start typing. And so that kind of works on our impulse control a little bit as well. So the second one is this right here that we're going to take a look at. I just did that totally incorrectly. I think it's 10 and then. So this one's going to be a little different because it's going to be visual and it's going to be backward. And I say that, but now that I'm thinking about it, I think this one will be auditory as well. So on this, again, you can pick 3 or 4 numbers. And I think I will play one to show you, and then I'll give you some quiet time so that if you want to do this, you can. So it did not say them, did it? It just flashed them. Okay, so now the instructions you're given are to type them in reverse. Instead of going forward, you're putting them in reverse. And I just want to see if I change something. You can change it. I was curious if I changed the visual to auditory in the search bar, if it would adjust and give me a different style. Although it says bad locator, so maybe not. So I'm going to give you an opportunity if you want to try this one out to give this one a try. All right, so once you get through it, you can end it and see your results. So I noticed in the chat, Alana mentioned that this one was way harder. So if the forward digit span was like a 2 to 4, how would you consider this one in comparison? Anyone wants to say? having trouble getting back to the PowerPoint.
I noticed it got a little easier as I practiced it. It took me a sec. It always takes me a second to like think about it. And Cindy said she got them all. She just couldn't get them typed in.
Gotcha.
And some people said still 3 to 4. So they're better than me.
Oh my goodness. Yes, and you'll notice I even changed from 4 digits to 3 digits. I didn't want to embarrass myself on a recording too much. But what we did there was we really dug into 2 different memory types. So one, actually 3, because we have that long-term storage retrieval of numbers and what numbers are. If we didn't have that, it would have made doing this piece of the memory even more difficult. So the forward digit span is accessing what we call our short-term memory. So short-term memory is just anything that we just hold into our mind, and we either spit it right back out the way it is, whether we're verbalizing it or we're writing it. And what we're really looking at today is working memory. So working memory is a little different from short-term memory, because working memory is accessing that short-term memory. So we're getting some sort of piece of new information, but we have to manipulate it in some way to come up with a new result. So in the backward digit span, you're given the numbers in your head, you're trying to remember them going forward, but you know that when you get them back out of your head, they have to be backwards. So you're manipulating them somehow in your mind. And so we oftentimes have many more challenges with working memory rather than short-term memory, because short-term, we just have it for a very brief moment of time. It's just something that we have to hold on to. But working memory, we're holding on to it, we're manipulating it, and then we're giving a new response. So we actually have 2 different types of working memory. So this is going to be important for our learners. As we think about when we go into the strategies section with this particular component of executive function, because when we want to access working memory, we can really do it through 2 separate ways in our brains. So one way is through what we verbal working memory, which I'm not going to be too shocked to just learn to discover that the verbal working memory is activated when we're processing auditory information. So when we hear information, our brain processes it one way. But then we have the nonverbal working memory. And this is a visual spatial memory. And so it's when someone visualizes something and holds it in their mind's eye. So we access our non-working verbal memory when we have things that are written that we can see. Sometimes it might be pictures. Sometimes it might be words like in a grocery list. So one thing that we know our learners really lack is the nonverbal working memory piece when it comes to accessing that from their mind. So if they see something and they're inputting it visually, that's a good strategy. But if we just randomly said something to them without that visual representation, they struggle getting it in their mind. So a lot of our learners struggle with even something as simple as, if I asked you, where will you be tonight at 6 o'clock? In that brief 2 to 3 second pause I just gave you, many of us thought to ourselves 6 o'clock and gave a picture of what we would be doing at 6 o'clock. Or we had like a quick snippet of what we would look like, or an activity we would be doing. Maybe you saw yourself at child's baseball practice, or maybe you had a quick flash of you fixing dinner. Our learners don't have that. And especially our learners with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder struggle even more with this. So when we think about things like checklist, which we will talk about, checklists are a great visual tool if the words mean something to you, but not all words mean something to people. So just for example, if I gave my daughter a shopping list and the only thing on it was apples, and I sent her into the store to get apples, when I wrote that shopping list, it means something to me. So I could picture myself walking into the produce department. I could picture myself walking right to the Honeycrisp apples and picking them up and going to the checkout. But for someone who didn't create the list, they just see apples. They may not know where apples are. They don't have any sort of visual representation or repertoire to pull from. They've been in a grocery store, but maybe never pay attention to where the apples are. Well, they finally get to the produce section. There are 10 different bins of apples, so they just go to the first one. And so when my daughter comes home and gives me a Granny Smith apple, and I'm expecting a Honeycrisp apple, I'm probably going to overreact a little bit because those are two completely different tastes. But I created the list. The word apple meant something to me. What it meant to the person who I gave the list to was something completely different. So as we talk about the use of visuals and those strategies to support our learners, I want us to consider that thing and really assessing, do our learners understand the picture and the word? Because even as adults, we can struggle and get some of those things mixed up, especially if we don't have a background to pull from. So working memory is impacted by a couple of key factors. First off, we have 3 seconds to access a kiddo's working memory. So that is what research tells us is the amount of time we have in order to access the working memory of really anyone. And if we don't access that working memory within 3 seconds, the next time we are introduced to that same piece of information, it's going to be like a new piece of information. So when they're like, I've never heard this before, they could be true. That could be true. You know, you've said it, but you didn't access the working memory to remember it. So keeping that in mind, working memory is greatly impacted by context. It's impacted by what's going on around the learners, the distractions that might be happening outside, like in the classroom, distractions that might be happening inside their brains. Maybe they're just lost in their own thoughts. But when working memory is compromised or limited, then it's probably more than likely going to impact other factors related to learning and performance. Because if we don't access that working memory, then we're not getting anything into our memory. And so if our working memory is overloaded, and we'll talk a lot more about this in the strategy section, but our learner is going to have a whole lot more trouble accessing that working memory part. So to go along with that, our students can prepare and study for a test. They can do it, 10 minutes, an hour. And the material might be stored in the long-term memory. They might have it. They might really have it. But when we think of contextual factors that could impact that long-term memory, we look at something like test anxiety. And so we know the student might have the content. It might have actually been stored into that long-term memory. But our working memory is what's going to help pull it out and help us to get that information out on paper. But if we have the test anxiety impacting our ability to pull from that, then we're not going to be able to show what we really know. So this is something that's a very accurate description of what's happening in our learners today, because we know that many of them are struggling with a lot of different types of anxiety that will impact their learning. And if you guys have any questions or something to add, or, if you have like an aha moment, or whatever, feel free to throw it in the chat, or, you're always welcome to unmute. Alana and I are great if you want to do that, and just ask your question that way too. So, working memory is kind of a tricky thing, because we all actually do have a personal limit to working memory. So some of that is the contextual factors. Sometimes our neurons aren't always firing together. And so we're not going to be working to our maximum potential. If we're sick, if we're tired, it's all going to impact our working memory. Working memory is relatively fixed. It's not permanently fixed, but we have to practice it and to work it every single day. It varies greatly among individuals. When I talk about working memory with people, I always ask them to think about different sized Post-it notes. So we have, in this day and age, so many different types of sizes of Post-its. We have little tiny Post-its. We have bigger Post-its. And we have even bigger Post-its than these, right? So we've got 3 different sizes that are just right here in my drawer. But then we've even got the long ones with the lines, which are amazing. We've got bigger, almost like a 5x7 size Post-it. We have big pieces of Post-it paper that we use in presentations. That's like our working memory. Some of us have this little Post-it, and some of us have a Post-it that could be a portrait size. So again, this is an important consideration, because the working memory that I'm working with, which I feel like this is a true representation of my working memory, is not the working memory of my neighbor. So they might be able to access a whole lot more working memory than what I can. So if our students have been impacted by things like trauma, starvation, anything like that, that is going to negatively impact the amount of working memory. And so we have to keep that in mind, especially if you're in an area where a lot of your learners come from a trauma background. This is an important piece of information, because what it tells us is then we want to use more of these strategies that Alana is going to talk to us about in our classrooms and in our spaces. In a class of 30, what research kind of tells us, if we're looking at a class of 30, 7 to 8-year-olds, so we're looking at like 2nd, 3rd graders here, 3 of them will have the working memory capacity of a 4-year-old. 3 will have the average capacity, working memory capacity of an 11-year-old. And then you've got everyone in between. And when you stop and think about that, that's a really big deal, because you are working with such a range of students. Like, each of their needs in working memory is going to be so diverse. And so when we talk about things like accommodations, and accommodations are things that we can all have access to help us gain access to that general education curriculum. Some of us might need more visuals than others. Some of us might need more things to help access that working memory than what other students do. It's not unfair. It's providing a level playing field. It's just like vision. Just, I can't see 20/20. I need my glasses. So you're going to let me have my glasses. It's not giving me an advantage. It's just leveling the way things are. So that's just important to keep in mind. Our working memory is like our mental workspace. So you can think of it like that too. Some people get great big canvases to work with. Others of us, we have a smaller working memory to work with. But again, I think, it goes back to what is impacting us outside of the context of the learning environment, because those things are going to weigh on us. Maybe we've got something going on with our family. Maybe we've got a big exam coming up. Maybe we've got spring break coming up, and that's all we can really focus on. I'll throw myself in that category because the idea of just taking a break from all of reality sounds so amazing right now. And I would rather be in that world sometimes than real world. So when we think about like characteristics of a student with poor working memory, these are our students who are very reserved in group activities. They might be maybe more on the sidelines. They're going to rarely volunteer. So this is important for you because if you know you have a student like this, they might be struggling. They might appear like they're with everything that's going on, but they might be missing some really important key things that you're going through with them. Oftentimes, these are the kids who behave as though they haven't paid attention. So when you ask them a question and it's like, I forgot. Did they really forget, or did they even have that access to the working memory to try to consider the information that was being presented? They often lose their place in complicated tasks because they just can't stay with the focus piece. So it could be even following along in a story. That can be challenging for people with working memory deficits. It could be following a recipe. It could be following the steps of a multiple step math problem. These students often make poor academic progress, so they're probably in some sort of tier 2 or tier 3 instruction, but when we're collecting that progress monitoring data, it's not really showing that there's much progress happening. And these are the kids who we say have short attention spans and are easily distracted. That's not always the case. They might just have a working memory access difficulty. It's not necessarily a short attention span. And that has a pretty negative connotation to it. So just something to consider. So working memory is impacted by the difficulty of a task and the level of distraction from both relevant and irrelevant stimuli. So remember with working memory, we're taking in some new pieces of information. And so the more new information we're trying to grapple with, the harder it's going to be for us to actually apply it. So the greater the task difficulty, the more stimuli being attended to or even ignored, then the higher demand on the working memory. So the more difficult the task is, and the more things I have to inhibit, so now you can see where inhibition comes in, the higher demand on my working memory. So if you're a formula kind of person, capacity plus load equals performance. So it's kind of funny. I see a lot of memes about things that people say like, like I'm at an age where if traffic gets really heavy, I have to turn down the radio, to concentrate. Or it's raining really hard, so I have to have the car quiet so that I can concentrate. Really, this is a working memory thing. The task becomes more difficult when we have some sort of stimuli that we weren't expecting. So we weren't expecting it to rain cats and dogs on our drive home. So we need to spend all of our short-term and working memory on just one single task. Whereas normally, if it were just a decent sunny day like today, and I'm driving home and I've got the radio on, and maybe I'm carrying on a conversation with the kids, everything's normal. But throw one little wrench in there, it starts to downpour. Then I have to concentrate. I have to stop all of this external stimuli just so that I can perform this task that I've done a million times and really usually have no trouble with it. So we can even be overloaded with a task that we have done routinely if we don't have any sort of distraction from it. So we can keep our working memory going a little bit, like taking new routes home from work, just to keep us on our toes a little bit. Okay. Just a couple more things about working memory. Kind of already mentioned, but situations that can lead to loss of information from working memory. We talked about those distractions and being able to tune them out, but also trying to hold in too much information. So if we're presenting what we hope is just one new step to a problem, that's some weird pop-up here. Okay, so if we're doing a multi-step math problem that maybe we did the first part, the first steps in the previous unit, now in this unit, we're taking the problem one step further. Or maybe it's a new component to the problem. So instead of just simple addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, maybe now I have an exponent that I have to work with. Well, if I didn't get all the first unit, and you're just trying to teach me the new skill of the exponent, it's not going to work because I didn't get that foundational skill. And so I'm trying to hold on to too much new information in order to perform the task. When this happens, it's difficult for students to engage with the content that we're trying to teach them or work with them on. Once information has been lost from our working memory, it's really gone for good. So if it doesn't go short-term working and get stored back in that long-term memory within 30 seconds, then that information is gone. And the next day when we start it again, it's going to be like brand new information. And so for those kids, we sometimes say, I don't understand because every day is like a brand new day. Well, it is because their working memory didn't hold on to it, get it stored back into the long-term memory. So you're starting all over again. So when we think about what this might look like in the classroom, we might see this in an English classroom when we're reading a story and we're asking our students to hold in different characters, different things that are happening in the plot, different character traits. Those are going to be challenging, especially if it's a new story. So we're going to build in activities that help support some visuals to help the learners with that. Another challenge for some of our learners, and I will say even me, I despise passwords. So having to remember a set of directions and try to log into a website and remember your password could be super difficult. For our middle school or secondary students, this might look like forgetting homework when they're standing at their locker. It's like they know they have something, but they can't pull from their working memory what exactly it is they had for homework. We mentioned the multiple step math problems and then remembering the rules. And this will also go into our next session on cognitive flexibility and really being able to adapt to different environments. But our students are often in more than one space in the school every single day. And our secondary learners may have 6, 7, 8 different classes in one day. And we expect them to remember the sets of procedures and policies and rules for every single class. And that's a lot when we think about young learners who do not have developed prefrontal cortexes. This is just challenging, and we're expecting them to go from the math teacher who is very systematic, routine, there's a policy, a procedure for everything, to the PE teacher where they get a run around. And I'm not like dissing on PE teachers. I'm just wanting you to see that just the different in the comparison to environments. It's like not all students will understand, well, I run around in gym class, so why can't I run around in math class? And so there's just an issue of remembering the rules for math class versus the rules for PE class. And that's a real struggle for learners of all ages. like I said, we're going to hit a lot more on that when we talk about cognitive flexibility. So our working memory is that mental workspace, like I mentioned. Overloading it causes us to forget. So as adults, we find ways to work around this. I don't know about you guys, but I write everything down. If I don't write it down on a Post-it note, it's not going to happen. And this overloading creates this struggle to achieve normal rates of learning, or what we call normal rates of learning. And I don't even like that word normal, because I feel like there is no normal for just about everything. But the expected rate of learning, maybe that's a better way to say it. All right, so that was a lot of stuff in 45 minutes about working memory. So Alana, do we have anything in the chat?
No, they were
Anything?
just kind of agreeing with you. And then, let's see. Carrie really liked your analogy with the Post-its, which I really liked it too. You kind of gave, it makes sense that you have your working memory that you have. And so we have to have these strategies and interventions because we can't make it bigger. So we're going to have to help you with what you have. Is that pretty much what you're saying, Katie?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So if you guys have any ideas, we do learn from each other, and we do love the chat and how you guys are I know Katie gave a lot of great information for the background. I'm going to go through strategies and interventions. So if you can use one of these, or you have, I would love it if you put it in the chat. Or if you think about, hey, maybe I'll try that tomorrow, that would be something great too, because I think that we're learning from each other is very helpful. And Katie and I really like this, that there's a lot of people on here. And so as I go through these strategies and interventions, if you've used them and they've worked, please let me know. If you haven't and you think you're going to try it, please let me know. That's just what I ask for this part. And Katie will mind the chat for me. Thanks, Katie. All right, so we're going to reduce distractions. So students who have not developed inhibition will struggle. So as a teacher with students with more cognitive disabilities, I had to have my students go into workstations. Let me know if you guys, if any of you are in those classrooms that you have to have workstations. If you don't know what they are, I'm going to explain them. So workstations are where students can go, and they either have like you separate them from the other students because they can't help it. They need a place to go and not look at somebody else, or they just get really distracted. So that is a strategy that I use in my classroom, and they knew when it was time for our work, they'd get to go to their workstations, and my students that needed it were able to do that. Another strategy is that you can use headphones with no music. It's just to cancel out that noise. And I'm sure maybe some of you guys use that with your students. Those are some of the things that you can use in your classroom to reduce distractions. Also, if you have windows, sometimes kids can't sit by the windows because they're just going to be looking at the windows and thinking about whatever they're thinking about in their brain. So in order to reduce the distractions, you're going to have to move them to a different seat. So that is really, we're trying to reduce, the biggest struggle with inhibition is the presence of a distraction. So we're trying to reduce distractions as much as possible. So those are some of the strategies that we can use for that part. And also another strategy that I like from Dr. Terry Scott to reduce distractions. If you are in a classroom and this student is always bothering another student, and instead of getting in that power struggle with the student to say like, okay, Katie, you're talking too much, you need to move to the back, you need to move over here. And sometimes the student will talk back to you. I wasn't talking, I wasn't doing that. Just have them, just blame it on the seating chart. So I think a good strategy is for a teacher is to move your students around a lot differently, so that sometimes it's not, you can't blame the teacher. You can't say, I didn't do that. But if you're moving around your seating chart, the students are always moving next to different people. And that could be another way you could reduce the distraction within those people. So even your best students need to move sometimes, and you're not just calling them out like, you need to move back because you're talking too much or you're doing all of these things. But really, Dr. Terry Scott had that to say that you just have to blame it on the seating chart, and students get to move around, and you can reduce distractions that way. Students tend to not argue as much that way. So that's just another strategy. Cognitive load theory, the amount of time information our working memory can process at any given time. So it depends on how much information students can take in. Katie kind of said with the Post-its, some people can get more information. They can follow 5 steps, and they can do that fine. Other students need it to be broken down. Overloaded learners cannot effectively process information into schemas for long-term memory storage and future recall. So sometimes if you're overloading some students, they're not going to be able to understand what you're saying. So for example, I was reading a research article today about executive functioning, and say the teacher says, before you quickly go upstairs, first put your homework away and don't forget to hand it in after lunch. That's a big sentence, right? Some of our students know what to do. They have to go quickly upstairs, but before they do that, they have to put their homework in their locker. And then they have to remember after lunch that they're going to hand it in again. Those are three things. Some students are able to do that, but other students are like, all I heard was go upstairs. They're not able to do that. So we have to make sure that, and this is a strategy, but we have to make sure that you're not just telling the students this. There has to be maybe a list on the board of what to do first, second, and third. There might even have to be a picture next to it too, and that's another strategy that we have. But just thinking about those multi-step directions that sometimes teachers say, but thinking about that and breaking it down, that's a lot of things that kids have to know, those three things. So we're going to get into that. There's a lot of things in the chat, so I'm going to stop after this part and let's see what it says.
Yep, a lot of people are throwing some strategies out that they're already using. So these are great to see just with the quiet workspace. One person, Leslie said, I like moving and movement, standing or under the desk on a stool or rebounder. And then Bill brought up limiting the amount of stuff on walls. And sometimes that's difficult for teachers, which I completely agree with, because we want to make it like a warm, welcoming, inviting space. But we also know that that can be overwhelming. And I think you bring up a good point. And we actually have a whole slide on visuals that Alana is going to go over too. But think about, what is the purpose for what is on my wall? That's a good question to reflect on. First this, then that. Yep. See, you guys are taking some of the strategies already that we have. You know some of these, yes. And then some comments about shuffling the seating charts. Had a couple of those.
Perfect, thanks. Yes, the students are less likely to argue with the seating chart did it than a teacher's moving them. So just remember that that does work. So reducing cognitive load, you guys have already talked about these strategies, but chunking, one idea is that say all students have 25 questions that they have to do. And you know a couple of those students, if you're going to give them a worksheet of 25 questions, they're going to shut down. It's too much. It's too much for their brain right now. Maybe they can do all those questions, but that is just not a good way to give them that whole information. So to chunk it, sometimes I would cut my worksheet into strips and give them like 10 or like 5 at first, or I would, they would have to do all of them. But the fact of you giving them the whole thing at the beginning just really shut them down. So if I can give them 5 and then they have to do more, like let's just start on these. That is helpful to reduce the cognitive load because they realize, look at all these problems I have to do. There's no way I'm ever going to get this done in this 47 minutes that I have. So that is a strategy that I've used and it's worked really well. It also helps when you give a student just like a blank piece of paper. That's not helpful for them. You have to chunk that too. So you have to say, I just need the heading right now. This is what I'm going to do. So those kind of strategies are helpful to reduce that cognitive load so that the students' brains don't just like shut off before the task even starts. Katie talked about activating prior learning. That's why it's really important for teachers to say, yesterday we learned this, and this is how it relates to this today, because we have to activate what did we learn yesterday, because they could have forgotten that. We talk about this, and you guys do a really great job in the chat, having instructions in visual form, written, and pictures. I saw a classroom like last week, and they were talking about coordinate planes. And the teacher and the kids were doing stations. So they had to graph something. They had to graph a triangle. And she said she noticed that nobody was putting like the dot and like the J. I don't know if you guys remember about coordinate planes, but you have to graph a dot, like a coordinate, and then put like a letter next to it. And nobody was doing that. And she stopped them and just said, hey, everybody, remember that you have to put your the coordinate plane, you have to put a letter next to it. And then she kept going. Well, maybe 5 kids did it and the other kids kind of did, they said okay, but then they didn't do it because she just did it auditorily, right? So some kids heard it, but they didn't get that information in their brains. So what could have happened instead is she could have modeled it and said, let me look at the board. This is how you do a coordinate plane. This is how let me show you how to do it. And you need to put the J next, you're gonna graph it and put the J, I'm gonna put it on the board. This is what I expect your papers to look like. And that would have given them, she's told you, but she also showed it to you as a visual. And that would have helped. And she kind of commented on that, like, that's what I should have done. Because some of the students said, yeah, I got it. But then we looked at the work at the end of class and they did not get that. So that's because they just thought they said they got it, but they didn't. So having instruction visual plus written is very helpful through that model. Providing information in multiple ways. We talked about that a lot with this executive functioning. So giving them many places to get it. They're going to get it off the whiteboard in the front of the room. They're going to get it in the computer. I'm also going to say it. I might have a list next to me. All those different ways is going to reduce the cognitive load. Routines. It's very nice to have the teachers. We know that first it's going to be the bell ringer, then it's going to be this, then it's going to be that. Those routines are really helpful for students with that, for that working memory. And we know that scaffolding is helpful for that working memory because they can't, if we're to reduce that cognitive load, we need to have those graphic organizers with those students. And we need to have any kind of visuals or any kind of things that the students can help to help them reduce that load. What do I need to do first? And then I'm going to go to the next, which you guys talked about. No, go ahead, Kate. That's good. So visualization, this helps structure and categorize information. We're going to talk about a specific strategy that we're using for visualization. But Katie already talked through this when she said, what are you guys doing at 6 o'clock? The students, like she said, that don't have very good executive functioning in this part, they can't remember, they can't think about that picture. So anytime we could use visualization of what the task is going to look like when it's done, anytime we can talk those things out, that is a strategy to use in your classroom. So we're going to create associations between concepts. It's going to make things more concrete and memorable. Anytime you can visualize yourself working in a space, doing these tasks, and we're going to kind of talk one out exactly like what it looks like, and I'll give you a little bit more in depth. But anytime we can do any of that visualization, that's helpful for our kids. We know that, oh, go ahead. No, you're okay. Oh yeah, we kind of talked all these things through, but we're going to talk about how we are going to assist in planning and organizing the task management and creating mental maps. Visual aids, we talked about this in our last executive functioning session, I think, or the one before it. So you guys probably already know these. And has anybody, since our last one, has anybody used any of these visual aids in your classroom? I think I talked through the fact that I went to a school and they were having a student that kept running out of their classroom, and then they put stop signs not just on their doors, but they put it all through their schools. It was a building visual aid because it was an elementary school. So the students were stopping and they weren't actually running out to the parking lot. There was like 2 students that kept doing it, and they actually reduced that. That is the use of visual aids. Does anybody use anything like that in their classrooms? Yeah, stop signs. You guys see good things because we know that when you see a stop sign, you're just automatically going to stop for a second. And even if you're not a reader, that's really helpful. I think one thing is really good for the cue cards or responses is having a green and a red card on your desk. And instead of them always talking and asking you for help, you can say, green, I'm good to go, and red, I need some help. And so the students can have the red, and then you can go over there and help them, and the green, that they're good to go. So anytime that you can add that to your classroom, that's a good strategy to help. Yes, I use visual timers, those timers that with the red that they kind of counted down, because students do not really know the time. You know, sometimes time is hard with kids. I taught middle school. If I say 20 minutes, we have to work on this, sometimes even kids didn't know what that meant. So having a timer is helpful for that. Anytime they have a graph or a chart or a poster, physical objects, I've used, charts with physical objects first. It's time to write. We actually have a pen there so the kids know it's time to do the writing. And anytime you have hand signals, I would say, how many more minutes do we need on an activity? 0 to 5 minutes. you need 0 minutes, you're ready to go, or do you need 2 minutes, or do you need 5 minutes? So I can get a gauge as a teacher how long that they need to get any task done. So anytime you can put those things in, that's helpful for kids, that they have all the strategies, because strategies don't work for everybody, but they work for some of the students. And the only way that we know if they work or not is for you to give them a variety, a menu of strategies, and they're able to decide what works best for them, and hopefully use them as they get older into high school. And as Katie says, we still need these kinds of things as we're adults. So that's very helpful to have those strategies. I'm going to stop right now. There's a lot of things in the chat, so I'm going to see if I need to go over any of that. People are putting a bunch of stuff that they're doing, which is great. Am I missing anything, Katie? Everybody's just kind of putting all of their things in the chat. I think you're muted.
My taskbar keeps vanishing and won't come back. So
Oh.
I was just going to say that one of the comments in the chat was about engaging multiple senses to increase learning. And I just wanted to say that is a great observation, because we know that, like 25 years ago, we thought we all have learning styles and we learned better one way than the other. And what research has really shown us now is that we have learning preferences. We have ways we prefer to learn. And so anytime we can engage multiple senses, then the more likely that information is to stick. So I loved that observation in there.
Perfect. I love that too. That was great. I'm trying to read it, but I love all your guys' comments. So thank you guys for that. So this is a time management matrix, and you can show your students, this is another strategy of however you want it to, however you want to do this. But this is just kind of saying like and everybody has their own way of doing this. As a teacher, I have priorities. As a person that works at the IEPTA Center, you have priorities, and you put urgent to not urgent, right? So what is important and what's not important? If you write it out and label it, you're more likely to get the things done that you have to get done. And just showing students like how to do this with their own life and everything that's going on is just great. What is important, what's not important, what's your goals, how am I supposed to get there with the goals? There's some great AI tools also that help you with lists and breaking things down, which we're going to talk about, I think, after the next one. But just giving students strategies of how to organize what is important and what's not in their daily life is helpful. But it's also going to be really helpful for when you get into adulthood or not in school anymore. We have to figure out when to prioritize those kinds of things. So this is just a little example of what's urgent, what's not urgent, what's important, what's not important. And excessive social media scrolling is very time consuming. Here's another example, important of what do I need to do first? What do I need to do next? What do I need to do later? And what don't I need to do at all? So if you're going to list some tasks at the left-hand side, and you're going to put all of the things that you have to do in a week or in a day, and then that's where you're going to put these categorizing. I looked at this website that's called Goblin Tool. Have you seen that, Katie? Yeah. And
it should be in the Padlet.
Oh, it's in the Padlet. Okay, it's in the Padlet. And if you want to go up, it's called Goblin Tool. Just like Goblin, like how, right? Goblin.com or Goblin Tool. If you just, yeah, there she goes. Katie put it in there. If you put in something like, let's just say for you guys, for adults, cleaning out your closet, you put that in there and it gives you a list. It breaks it down of the tasks with your students. And I think this is a good strategy to do with your students, because they can use it at home, but they can also use it like completing a research project. And it would tell you all of the steps of what to do. And it would even say how much time is needed for each section. So that's just a nice thing. AI is sometimes our friend, right? We have to make sure we're doing it right, but it does help us brainstorming, think about a list of all of the things that you need to do to clean out your closet or to write a research report. And it gives you all of the little task bars. It says how much time that you think that you might need on each of the parts of it. And it's a really good task like breaks down the task. If you guys do task analysis with your students, I think it's really great, like to cook something or to do a recipe in the life skills program, to what do they need to do at home, to what kinds of homework, anything that you want to get done, you can put in there. So I think that's kind of a cool tool to use. And then you can talk to your students about how do we need to get this done? How do we break this down? How much time do we need? And what do you think will work for you? Because again, we're going to give you all these strategies and you're going to have to decide what you need. Katie says she used post-it notes. Every day I write down my list of priorities and I kind of do it like this. Like I kind of rank it. Like what do I have to get done and what I don't get done? And then I check them off. So, and you guys tell me what you guys use in your chats, or if you haven't figured that one out yet, because you're still thinking and learning. But I really think it's important to give kids strategies and then let them think about what they need to do.
One additional thing that I like about Goblin tools is that you can specifically put in a time frame too. So I have 2 weeks to complete a
Yes,
report
that'd be really quick.
on something, but then you can also change the spicy level. So I can't remember where it's at on it's somewhere at the top, but it's like chili peppers. And basically the spicier you make your request, the more the task will be broken down. So if it's a task that you think is going to take more working memory and your learner is going to have more new pieces of information or more, they just need more steps, you can make it spicier. So then that's using elements of differentiation. So when it comes to a task, I might need it broken down step by step by step by step by step, but Alana might just need bullet points of like main ideas. Oh, this, and this. Well, hers might have 4 steps, mine might have 12 steps, but it's to complete the same task. I just happen to need a little more support than Alana. So I like that spicy level that you can teach your kids about too.
I love that, Katie. Thank you. We'll move on to the next one. So front loading is really great. And this is allows time for students to process information. You know that something's going to be hard tomorrow. You know that they're going to get a new math equation. So maybe at the last couple of minutes, you're going to say, come over here to me. I'm going to explain what we're going to do tomorrow. This is what you're going to see it, but you need to see it before the whole class sees it, maybe a couple of students. That could be with any task that you're doing. Students can see it more often. That's helpful for their memory, and that will connect them to what they already know. That's another way that we can front load it. So making sure that we do that. And it reduces the cognitive load. It helps them with that cognitive load. And anytime we can reduce that, that's going to help them. And retrieval becomes easier if they've already seen it. So if you have new vocabulary words tomorrow that you know that they're going to have a hard time with, go over them the night before, write them down for them. They're going to see it before the other class sees it. That's just another strategy to use for those students, because you know that maybe 4 or 5 of the students in your class need it more. And you have maybe a minute or 2 minutes at the end of class that you can do that. So front loading is another strategy that if you haven't tried it, I would try it for some of those harder concepts for those students. Games, Katie looked at those games that hopefully you guys will do it on your own and maybe with your class at the beginning of this webinar that you guys can practice your cognitive, your working memory. I think I need to. Other games that you can have in your classroom that help is memory, picture bingo, checkers, any kind of word searches. They say that people should, do that as they get older. You have to keep your brain working. I don't know if you guys have heard that before, but we really do have to keep our brains working. And that way the crosswords and word searches are great. Crazy Eights, Uno, Go Fish, War, they help with memory, they help with inhibition, they help with turn taking, they help with all of those things and social interactions with students. So anytime we can get a little bit of time in, it's not just, that's just a game that they're playing. It's really helping them with those kinds of scholastic word. My son likes Wordle. All of those kinds of things are helping you, with accessing that memory, anything. So it is nice if you have some downtime that you can do some of these things, if you can do some of these things in your class, and not just kids on their phones or looking at Google, but really working on these games is helpful for that. Mnemonics, we talked about this, I think, in a different webinar, but anytime and throw in a mnemonic that you guys use or one that you already know. But I learned how to play the piano. Every good boy does fine. Like they had, like the notes had a letter. I still remember that. PEMDAS is, of course, one of those that math teachers use. Parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. But if you can think of any mnemonic to make connections for students, that is helpful for their memory. If you can make one up with kids, that is going to help them. It's evidence-based. the research shows that students have to have these mnemonics in order to learn certain things. We had cubes in my class, which was anytime they had to do a problem solving in math, circle, underline, box, explain, and solve. I mean, I can say that all day. You can use it for any math. It's a word math problem. So anytime we had a word math problem, we had to circle the numbers. We had to we had the steps. We had the anchor charts, so students would use it. And those kids needed it, and you could tell that they used it because even on standardized tests, they would write out the mnemonics, and then they would solve the problems. I mean, we couldn't give them the graphic organizers, but they did it so much that that's the tool that they used. Do all students need it? No, but anytime you can make these connections, these students that with that low working memory of those kids that, and sometimes just even I need them, those mnemonics are really helpful to teach those students and to find ways to connect information to forming and retrieving long-term memory. Like I said, I learned how to play the piano when I started when I was 5, and I can still tell you the mnemonic from that. So that means that that's in my long-term memory, and I'm probably not going to lose it, hopefully, ever. Anybody else put any of them in there? All right, thanks. Yes. And if you guys have any, just talk to each other with that. Yep, anytime you have that. Repeated practice. I think Katie went over this last time. Pete, repeat. We're sitting in a boat. Pete fell out. Who was left? So it's like, Pete and repeat. Repeat the practice. We have to, and that's, that's just really good for kids to just practice, practice, practice. I always say practice makes progress. I don't like to say practice makes perfect because we really just have to repeat for students to get that in their schema and be part of their memory. Otherwise, they're going to lose it. Katie said we had 30 seconds to get that into that memory, so we really have to do that. Somebody said if and then and situational awareness. So what happens if and then something, like think out the plan. And again, I think I went over some of these strategies before, but I'm going to go through some of them again. You're going to say, okay, I want everybody to go get their math or their library books and sit on the rug, and they're going to sit crisscross applesauce, and they're going to look at me. What are you guys going to do again? They're going to tell you what you said, because anytime they tell you what they're going to do is they're going to get that little picture in their brain. So the kids are going to say, okay, I'm going to walk over with my hands to my side. I'm going to talk to my friend. I'm going to walk over with my hands to my side, or I'm going to have my library book in my hand. I'm going to go sit on my circle, and I'm going to sit down this way, and I'm going to listen to my teacher, wait for directions. Before you're going to tell them that, and then they're going to repeat that to you. Anytime you can rehearse that, they can visualize something like that, that is going to, practice makes permanent. Yes. And they're going to do that too. They're going to be able to do that with you. So anytime you can rehearse tasks before they happen is helpful. Okay, when you guys go get a drink of water, this is what you're going to do. Have them repeat it to a friend, have them repeat it to you. You're going to have to keep doing that so that they can mentally rehearse what they look like going in the hallway, walking down the hall, getting a drink of water, coming back to class. Anytime they can visualize any kind of things that they can do, that's going to strengthen their executive functioning with that working memory. It increases temporal awareness. And then freeze, point, and share your plan is kind of what I talked about. Like, okay, we're going to talk about this, and we're going to freeze, and you're going to share what you're going to do, and then you're going to do it. I'm not going to tell you what to do, because like Katie said, when she goes to the grocery store and she sees that apple, that's because she made that list. I'm going to tell you how to get ready to go home, but that's in my brain. That's how I'm getting ready to go home in my brain. I need you guys to put yourself in those shoes and tell me what you need to get home. So that's how we have to practice that visualization for those students to strengthen that memory. So this is something that you could use with kids. And I do like color coordinated things, and I like things for pictures. And this is putting the students' goggles on. That's what we like to call them, future goggles. So what does something look like when I'm done? And if you have little kids, you can actually say, okay, we're going to put our future goggles on. And if you don't, even if you have middle school kids, this is going to work for you, or high school kids. It may be in a different way. This could work for you. So let's say at the end, when I'm done, what is it going to look like? So let's say the task is you're going to make a poster about a historical figure in school. So you're going to do that last one first. So when I'm done, what is it going to look like? So maybe the student draws a poster, like a pretend poster with a person's name on it, with a title, with maybe a little picture on it. That's what the students are going to do when they're done. Because again, when we have to visualize what it's going to look like when it's done. Then we're going to work backwards. We're going to do backwards design. So what steps do I need to take to get it done? Well, I need to put a heading. I need to make sure it's the grammar's right. I need to make sure that I have at least a title on there. All of those steps are what you're going to put in that green one. And then you're going to go backwards. What do I need? Now, what do I need? I need to get markers. I need to know where I'm going to access the information, get the research for what my poster is going to need. I'm going to need a poster board. Those are the materials that you're going to need. So you're going to work backwards, and you're going to tell your students that they need to put their future goggles on. And what do we want it to look like at the end? What's our last thing going to be? And then we're going to move backwards. This is Sarah Ward's. We have it linked, and this is her website, and she has a lot of great strategies for students. And I really like this one, especially for maybe younger kids. And I think middle school would actually work with that. And it gives you another idea right here with this. Again, what does it look like when we are finished with this? When the group is over, what we're going to see, we're going to complete. So maybe you're going to give them the learning objective would be that, we have recorded whatever you're doing, like it could be a research article, it could be a group project. What is it going to look like at the end? This one is maybe they did a podcast or they did the slide. So they did a picture of the iPad, but you can do whatever. They can do a picture, they can write it. And then what steps do I need to get there? Again, and then what materials do I need? So we're not starting with what I need first. We really want them to see their future selves getting done with the task. They're going to be able to get this done. We're going to see this is what it's going to look like when it's done. And then how am I going to get there going backwards? That's the backwards design. And we have these linked so that you can do this with your class if you want to try it. But I think it's a great strategy to use. This is her website. Perfect, Katie. So this is her website. If you guys want to try this, I read some research articles actually today on her website. She's got lots of great resources, and she talks a lot about executive functioning. And we really like her website and all of the things that she does. She's a speech pathologist, but she works with all kids with all executive functioning. So it's not just students that need speech services. Get ready to go home. This is kind of an idea for your classroom. Instead of telling them or giving them a list of what to do, have them think about what they need to get to go home. So having a picture of a student getting ready, even a student in your classroom, even if you're in a class that you can't have less students, you can maybe even do a picture of the students in your class, what they look like, because the students will know what that means for them. That means that they have to go to their locker, they have to put their lunch bags away, they have to put their papers and their coats on. But you're not telling them what to do. They're taking ownership of what it looks like when I go home, because it's going to look different when I go home than when Katie goes home. So instead of giving them that list, maybe just give them the finished end product of what it looks like. And in their brain, they have to decide, what does it look like when I go home? So that really does that. It shifts that to, I'm telling you what you need, to they have to tell you what they need for themselves. That's kind of like that shift in that. And then if you guys use UDL, Universal Design for Learning, this removes barriers to increase student access. I think Bill kind of hit it on the head with multiple pathways. We all learn differently. We all want to show you what you know differently. So we just make sure that we're going to reduce those barriers and have students show us what they know the way that they know it. If the learning objective is the students have to give a summary of a chapter, it doesn't ever say, typically in the standard, it probably doesn't say they have to write it. So how are they going to give me that summary? They're going to tell me it. Maybe they're going to write it. Maybe they're going to make a podcast. Maybe they're going to act it out. They're going to still give me a summary of the chapter, but they're going to do it the way that they want, that they're going to show me what they know. It doesn't say in that standard that unless it says that they have to write it, we want to make sure that we get some flexibility so students are able to show us what they know in the way that they choose. And it increases student engagement when we do things like that. And that is all of it. So that's everything. So do we have anything else in the chat? Because I kind of talked to those. But
No, just little things that people have thrown in.
oh, perfect. I love it. Thank you, Mandy. Awesome. Well, that's all that we have today for our strategies. That was a lot of strategies. I think a lot of you guys are using some. And then maybe hopefully you got 1 or 2 ideas to try, and you have a bit deeper understanding of, sometimes when students say, I don't know, then maybe it's easy to get frustrated as a teacher and like, oh my gosh, I just told them this yesterday. But maybe think, okay, their working memory needs some work. Maybe we're going to shift our thinking to how can I help support your working memory? That's how I would say it. What about you, Katie?
I love that idea. What can I do to support the working memory? It's a great way to think about it.
So if you wouldn't mind doing our evaluations on the left, of course, we'll send you will get your PGP certificates for your hour-and-a-half spent with us today. Katie and I will stay on for questions. We hope that you learned something, you got something out of it, and expanded your working memory knowledge. That's our hope.